Hey everybody, it's Madam Morbid. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to revisit a topic I've done before, but I did it a while ago, and this time I'm going to focus more on the good guys in this case. The people of ORONOGO who fought back when Clyde Barrow, two of his associates, and Bonnie robbed the bank. Before we talk about ORONOGO, I want to give a brief introduction describing where they've been before this. In March 1932, Ralph Fults showed up at the home of Henry and Kimi Barrow. He was there to see his old friend Clyde, who he had met while they were in prison. They actually had been shackled to each other neck to neck while being transferred to Eastham prison farm. Ralph got out in August of 31, and he had been looking for information that Clyde had been paroled as well. Eastham prison farm was absolutely brutal. Texas reporter Harry McCormick, who came up in my episode about the Young brothers, he was actually there and at the house when they were killed. He had been investigating the Texas prison system and how horrific it was. And there was a lot of outcry. The prison system has got to be reformed. This is unacceptable. People like Clyde, petty criminals, were going in and they were coming out more violent, more well-versed in how to be a criminal. They were angry. They were probably suffering from things like PTSD that people didn't even understand at the time. It was not helping the crime rate at all. In fact, this kind of brutal system made it way worse. According to Clyde's family, he went in as a sweet young man and came out a rattlesnake. Inmates were being murdered, they were being beaten, they were being tortured. Clyde had watched Ralph Fults get pistol whipped by the guards. He had watched a prisoner be taken behind a hill. There had been shots, and the prisoner never came back. They always just said, oh, they were trying to escape. They were just murdering them. And so Clyde said he would never, ever go back, and he wouldn't be taken alive. But that didn't mean he didn't try to go straight. So when Ralph came to visit, and Henry came in and said, oh, Clyde will be home in a little bit, he's at work, Ralph was surprised. Oh, wow, he's trying to go straight. But as soon as Clyde got home, Dallas police endlessly harassed him. Anytime there was ever a crime, even if there was no evidence connecting Clyde to the crime whatsoever, they just always came for him anyway. It was literally impossible to keep a job. When Clyde got home, he informed his family, I was just fired, because his boss had said, the police keep coming in here to get you and haul you out to question you. I'm sorry, son, it's bad for business, and business is already bad. I just can't keep you on. And this isn't the first time this has happened to Clyde. It has happened over and over and over again, and this was the final straw. Clyde had had enough. When Bonnie and Clyde historian John Neal Phillips was interviewing one of Ralph Fults' friends for his book, Running with Bonnie and Clyde, that person said, I believe to this day that if the police had just left that boy alone, you and I wouldn't be talking right now. And so this day, standing in his family's filling station, he announced, that's it. They won't let me have a job, so I won't ever work again. He made the decision to go full-time criminal because essentially it was his only option except leaving town. Now, he had tried very briefly. His sister Neal had gotten him a job in Massachusetts, and he had tried. But he didn't last 2 weeks. He came home, and Neal was furious. She said, you have no idea what it took me to get that job for you. He said, I know it makes no sense, but I missed home. I missed you. I missed mom and dad. I missed my family. I just can't do it. I cannot be away from my home and the people I love. And yes, while he could have made the choice to leave his family, is that a choice someone should have to make? It shouldn't be impossible to make an honest living after you've done your time. And so, the Barrow Gang was born. Clyde had a series of different accomplices. It was always changing. Some people he was with a lot in the beginning was Raymond Hamilton, Ralph Fults, Ted Rogers, Frank Claus. And the goal from the very beginning, these jobs were to raise money to finance a raid on the Eastham prison farm to rescue everybody from that horrible place. It was something Clyde fantasized about when he was still there. There was actually a prisoner there named Aubrey who had done something for Clyde that made him want to rescue him. Clyde had been attacked repeatedly by another prisoner named Ed Crowder. They called him Big Ed. He was cruel. He was brutal. He was mean. No one liked him. But he was a trustee, which meant he had more power over the other prisoners. Well, this Aubrey was also a trustee, and he hated Big Ed. He was serving a life sentence. He was never getting out. Killing a prisoner wasn't going to hurt him in any way in terms of having to stay longer. So he told Clyde, lure him over into this corner. You can beat him on the head with something, and I've got a knife. I can, make it look like we got in a fight, and I shanked him. No one's going to care. No one cares about the death of a prisoner. And that's literally what happened. Clyde went over, pretended he was using the bathroom. Ed came in, seeing a chance to assault him again. But Clyde was holding a pipe. He hit him as hard as he could. Probably killed him with that first blow. And then Aubrey just slipped in. Clyde went back and got in his bunk. No one knew any different. No one cared. Aubrey had done something for Clyde, and so he wanted to raid Eastham, get out as many as he could, but specifically Aubrey. In those early days, a lot of their first few robberies went pretty bad. They barely got away, or they didn't get much money. It just wasn't working out real great. But they decided to try a bank. Raiding Eastham is going to be really expensive, and it will take an eternity to raise enough if they keep doing these tiny jobs. So in Lawrence, Kansas, Ralph Fults, Raymond Hamilton, and Clyde scope this bank out for a few days, and they figure out that each morning the bank president gets there around 8:45 or so. 10 minutes later, employees start coming. There's one guard, and he's usually not there yet when the bank president arrives. So on the third day, they intercept the bank president. They force him to let them in, and according to Ralph Fults, they're gone before the guard gets there, and he said they got $33,000. Raymond had been afraid to do the bank, but after this, he was excited. He was ready to rob another bank immediately. Now, whether or not they got $33,000 can't be verified, but they got enough to fund the raid on Eastham. Well, Ray wanted nothing to do with that. He said, I don't care about a bunch of convicts. He'd never been in prison, for one thing, so he didn't really understand. He'd been in jail, but not prison. So he took his share and he left. Clyde was never a huge fan of Raymond Hamilton. I think the feeling was pretty mutual. Clyde said something to the effect of, I hope he chokes on that money. Well, try as they might, the Eastham raid does not happen, at least not yet. They had somebody informing on them. They were going to try to rob two banks at once. If you've watched my Dalton Brothers episode, that is not a good idea. The Dalton brothers all got killed. If you haven't watched it yet, my Dalton Brothers episode is one of my favorites that I ever made. I loved making that episode. They all got killed in Coffeyville. Luckily, they noticed that there were some Texas Rangers sitting in a car watching, so they knew someone had probably tipped them off, and they didn't do that. They used their money to buy weapons and bulletproof vests. They turned out to basically be fakes. Most of the weapons didn't work, and when they fired at the quote-unquote bulletproof vests, they were torn to shreds. Well, certain members of the gang don't do what they're supposed to. They're supposed to steals some weapons. Why buy them when you're just going to get ripped off? So they try to rob them from some hardware stores. Ralph Fults gets caught. Bonnie went with them. She never took part in robberies, but she was with them. She got caught. Ralph said he would take the blame. They had nothing on her. He would tell them that she was their kidnapping victim. And that's what he did. And a grand jury let her go eventually. But Clyde left them. And she was in jail for a bit. And she was kind of hurt by this. Now, when she got out, she went right back to him. But Ralph remained in prison. He ended up right back at Eastham. This gave Clyde even more of a reason to raid Eastham, to rescue Ralph. Then something happens that changes everything. One of the jobs goes wrong, and Ted Rogers shoots and kills a civilian named John Butcher while they were robbing his store. Clyde was not in there at the time. He was the getaway driver. But that didn't matter. Now Clyde is wanted for murder. Ted Rogers looked just like Raymond Hamilton. So the wife of this man, John Butcher, she identifies Raymond Hamilton as being the killer. Raymond was in Michigan at the time, but they legitimately did look a lot alike. And even though Clyde didn't like Raymond Hamilton, he also didn't want him to go down for something he didn't do. That was just not right in his mind. Poor Raymond got laid off from his job in Michigan, so he came home to find out he was wanted for murder. He said, "I'm what?" Once he found that out, he said, well, I guess I might as well just join the gang again. Once Clyde was wanted for murder, that's when getting caught means death. And once that was the case, Clyde was willing to kill in order to get away. In that way, the death penalty can backfire, because when getting caught means you die, you'll do anything to not get caught. So that was followed by the death of an officer in Stringtown, Oklahoma. Raymond was with them in that. I have an episode about it. At this point, Bonnie does not take part in any of their robberies. Clyde won't let her. He wants to keep her safe. She's just his girlfriend. He loves her. He wants her with him. She wants to be with him. Wherever he goes, she goes. She just flirt with having a little bit of a role, and we're going to see that in ORONOGO. But the reason they end up in Missouri is because it's just too hot in Texas and Oklahoma. They're too well known. They're too wanted. People don't really know them in Missouri. Not yet. So they've come here to kind of regroup. And they're down to essentially their last dollar. Clyde needed to have associates. He needed someone there. It worked better if you have multiple people in a robbery. You've got one guy to hold the gun on any hostages. You've got one guy to put the money in the bag. You've got somebody in a getaway car. So he liked to have at least 3 guys, including himself. And a lot of his normal associates are elsewhere, or they're like Ralph, they're in prison. So he picks up 2 guys from Waco, Texas, Hollis Hale and Frank Hardy. You know, they run in similar circles, and they expect big things out of Clyde. They expect a huge payout, like what they got in Lawrence, Kansas. But the thing is, in Lawrence, Kansas, they got lucky. Robbing a bank isn't just walking in and saying, "Stick 'em up." The reason other gangs get so much money, like the Barker gang or Dillinger, Capone, is because they've got people on the inside. They have bought off politicians. They have bought off the bankers. They have bought off the cops who help them get in so that they have the biggest scores possible. Well, Clyde didn't have connections to anyone. Clyde was a kid. He was in his early 20s. He'd grown up in abject poverty. He had very minimal education. He was a nobody. And he was learning as he went. There's a pretty powerful myth out there that Bonnie and Clyde had a very comfortable existence. They dressed really nice. That they were capable, almost professional criminals. And that just is not the case. Clyde wasn't even that good of a criminal. Most of the time, they pulled very small jobs in very small institutions. A modern equivalent would be somebody who just traveled the roads and robbed convenience stores, taking enough to keep going. Most of the time they slept in their car or they slept on the ground. In the early days, they probably could have stayed in a motor court here or there. But Clyde didn't like to do that, especially once people knew what they looked like, which is going to happen about a year from this time period. They just couldn't stay somewhere where they could be recognized. So they had a pretty miserable existence. What Clyde was good at was stealing cars and getting away, and he was a really good driver. But here in late November 1932, Clyde's about to learn he isn't as good at robbing banks as he thinks he is. And eventually he'll reach the point he doesn't like doing banks. It's too risky. It draws too much attention. But that's a lesson he still has to learn. I'm back here in ORONOGO. This time I'm going to film the right location. Let me show you what I filmed. The Farmers and Miners Bank was right here in 1932. He picked this bank because it was a tiny town. He thought they would be real greenhorns. They wouldn't see him coming. There wouldn't be a lot of security. He really underestimated the people of ORONOGO. This was the bustling business district. This was downtown. That main area of town was about 2.5 blocks in size. And the bank was on the southeast corner. The one thing Clyde failed to bargain for was Robert Norton. Buried somewhere in this cemetery is a man named Robert Norton. This is a huge cemetery. There is no one in the office. I couldn't get access to a map. And I don't know and have no way of searching a database to find where he is. I don't know how I could possibly find him. Robert's a really interesting guy. In 1932, he was 60 years old, but he was an MD, and he had worked as a doctor for a long time. And in his elder years, I guess he decided he wanted to run a bank. He had been there for 11 years at that point. And in that time frame, the bank had been robbed 3 times. One of those times, he pulled a gun on the would-be bandit. In that incident, the bank actually made $5 because the robber put a $5 on the counter and pretended like he needed change. Well, when Norton pulled the gun on him, he fled and left the $5 bill. So they did make money on that transaction. On the same side of the street, about 1.5 blocks away on the other side of the post office, was Wetzel's garage. It's gone. Now, Burley Wetzel and his garage seemed to be extremely important in town. Burley had been on the city council. He served as an alderman. He began his life as a very young man working in the zinc mines. I found an article from 1903 in which he was almost killed in a mining accident, and he actually saved the life of a fellow miner. The two of them were down in the mine, and somehow the air had gone poison, and the man he was with was starting to lose consciousness. Burley was pretty close to passing out himself, but he managed to notify the people at the surface that they were in trouble, and he managed to get his companion into whatever apparatus they used to pull people back to the surface. And he just barely saved both of their lives. I'm not sure when he started the garage, but eventually he worked his way until he was a business owner. And he did have one employee, Capp, who seems to have worked for him for a very long time. And the garage was in the paper all the time for events taking place there. One time they even had a coroner inquest. That had something to do with an explosion in the mine. So it was a really important place. I'm bummed I could never find a photograph of it anywhere. He doesn't seem to have ever married. In the 1930 census, he's in his early 50s. He's living with his mother, his sister, and his nephew. His sister probably took care of his elderly mother. At that time, she would have been around 80 years old. So it seems like he probably paid the bills. His sister took care of his mom. She actually died just a few months before the robbery. I also found a news story where he and Cappy built a fire truck for the city in 1953. It saved the city a lot of money. And this would have just been a couple of years before he died. He died in 1955. Cappy died in 1976. But on this day, it's just a typical day for them. Cappy had just got back from a hunting trip, so he happened to have his rifle with him. I'm not sure about Burley. Maybe he just kept one there. The front door was right here. November 29th, they come here to the bank to scope it out. Bonnie came in here the day before they were going to do the robbery. She was probably dressed appropriately, but she had no idea how to behave in a bank because she'd never been in one before. Their families were so poor, no one had ever had a bank account. So she didn't know what to do when she got in here, and she didn't have any business to conduct. She was just in here to scope the place out. Now, this is a very small bank. I mean, by the time you hit the desk, which was probably right here, I mean, the lobby is nothing. So if she's coming in here, this beautiful woman, she's going to draw attention just for that. And she wanders around. She probably looked uncomfortable because she didn't know what to do. And she doesn't conduct any business. He knew immediately what she was doing. It's a shame he was so experienced at being robbed, but he was. So the next day, he was ready. The night before the robbery, they stayed in Carthage, Missouri. It was only a few miles away from ORONOGO. They must have spent some time trying to find a car to steal. They found one on Lyon Street. In 1932, this house was owned by Hugo and Edna Weidler. Hugo ran a filling station on Route 66, and Edna worked for a doctor's office. Edna's car was sitting out front. It was a Chevy sedan. Around 7:30, 8 o'clock, this black Ford V8 pulled up in front of the house. It had 4 people in it, 3 men and 1 woman. 2 of those people were Bonnie and Clyde. 2 people got out of the car, got in Edna's car, and took it. The gang pulled up in Edna's car. They turned off Central Street, onto 2nd Street, and stopped right at the front door. The car faced Main Street, which is the street they will flee down when the robbery is over. Clyde and Frank Hardy got out, and Hollis Hale stayed behind the wheel. I'm a little unsure what kind of weapons they had. At first it was reported that Clyde had a submachine gun. Then it was reported, no, we think it was more like a shotgun. But they're well dressed. Clyde liked to look nice, but they're bearing big old weapons. They order Mr. Norton to put his hands up, but instead of doing that, he dives down behind the counter. So that's probably right in here. He dives down and he grabs the gun that they've got stored under there. He pulls it out, and I don't know if I'm envisioning this correctly, but it sounds to me like there was some sort of a slot that maybe you could put bills in, or something small that he was able to shoot through that while maintaining being protected. He got 3 or 4 shots before his gun jammed. And of course, being shot at, Clyde just opens up and blows several big holes into this counter. But luckily for Mr. Norton, they had recently, because the bank had been robbed so many times, They had recently put in a steel bulletproof piece of metal behind the desk to protect him, and it kept him from getting hurt. Now the wood of the counter got pretty damaged. When the gun jammed, there was actually a customer in the bank at the time. He worked for the Frisco Railroad. His name was Audley Farrar. He was a dispatcher for the Frisco Railroad, and he was in here to be a customer. And this is all going down in front of him, right here. I can only imagine him, stepping against the wall just as far back as he could go, trying to disappear. Well, they're shooting at each other. And when the gun jams, he tells Mr. Norton, give yourself up. Basically, I don't want to see you get shot. So he does. On one of these sides, there was a door that had a glass pane in it. Frank and Clyde walk over to that, and they break the glass in order to reach in and unlock the door and open it. And when they do that, Frank Hardy cut his hand. And they stepped through. Back here where he's huddled, hiding. I'm sure Clyde probably disarmed him. He said the guy with the big gun, which was probably Clyde, never said a word. And Frank, who had a pistol of some sort, said, forget about him, let's just get the money. Now, if Clyde was going to kill him, he would have done it already. The moment that gun jammed, he wasn't a threat anymore. And it's very lucky for him that his gun did jam. Because if he had maintained a threat, Clyde would have killed him. He never killed somebody if he didn't have to, but if you were a threat to him, he absolutely was gonna kill you. But he did like intimidating people too. So he liked to let people think that he might kill them, but he really didn't intend to unless he thought they really were a danger to him. So, meanwhile, outside, people along the street here have started to notice. Right across the street, Jack Watson was working on a mine derrick. He was a really young guy, just in his early 20s, and he could see what was happening here. Bullets had gone out this front window here, and it was drawing people's attention. So he raises the alarm. He's yelling, the bank's being robbed, the bank's being robbed. And a crowd of people is starting to gather and just watch. Well, some guys did have guns though. Cappy said he heard Burley yell, they're robbing the bank, get your gun. Both grabbed their guns and ran outside. Because this was the business district at the time, from the garage they could not see the bank. So among all the buildings lining this street, they took an alley between two of those buildings, and they took shelter behind a truck. When Jack starts yelling about the bank being robbed and people start gathering, Frank is laying on the horn, telling everybody in here, hey, everything out here is going to hell. And so they grab what money they can. They leave behind some stray dollar bills that some of which have blood on them. And at first they think maybe one of them got shot in the gunfight, but he had just cut his hand on the glass. But they're grabbing what money they can and run out the front door. According to the newspapers, they dive into this car, and then when they ran, they headed off that way and took Maine and just screeched off. Sheltering behind the truck, the mechanics of Wetzel's garage are firing at them the whole time. They don't really hit anything until the car drives right by them. One shot does enter through the passenger door. It nicks the driver's seat and goes out the other side. But in all the shooting that happens here, no one gets hit, no one's hurt. Clyde put quite a few holes in their truck. As they sped off, Clyde fired through the back window of Edna's car. So when she got it back, it had blood in it from Frank's cut hand. It had I think just one bullet hole. There might have been a couple, and then a shattered rear window. You might be wondering where Bonnie is during all of this. Bonnie had the black Ford V8. She was sitting on Ivy Road waiting for them. What you're seeing now is the path they may have taken as they fled, because I do not know how the roads have changed. Maybe they haven't changed at all. I just don't know. But the quickest way to Ivy Road now is I took Main, then turned left on 4th Street until I hit Ivy Road, and then I turned right. And somewhere on that stretch of highway, which at that time would have been dirt, and there wouldn't have been anything out there except maybe the occasional farmhouse. Wherever she was sitting, they abandoned the car they had, Edna's car, and switched into that black Ford V8. So they literally just stole Edna's car to rob the bank and then abandon it and switch out cars. All they got was like $120. If that. And Hale and Hardy were so upset at how badly it went. They lied to Clyde about how much they had gotten. They said it was only $80, split it 3 ways. Then they took their share plus what they were stealing from Clyde and left and never came back. Right now I'm standing in the vault, or what used to be the vault. They just moved this out, and I missed it. I didn't get the message. It took them several weeks to take it apart, and they moved it out last Friday to Gibsland, Louisiana. It's going to a great place. It's going to be safe. It's going to be in a museum. The owner didn't care. He's just like, yeah, go take it, do it, whatever you want with it. But as far as I know, they never got in the vault, because they only got whatever petty cash was on site. This bank had been robbed so many times that they never kept more than $300 here. If somebody needed a big amount, it was kept off-site somewhere else, and they would, go get it if need be. They marked every brick so that when they put it back together, they know how they're doing it. So here's some of the chalk they used to do that. For Robert Norton, that was it. The 4th bank robbery was all he could take. And he stopped. He left business. And then he moved to Carthage. He was nearly 60 when this happened. But he died in 1955, a happy old man. In January 1933, Clyde and Bonnie and W.D. were in Springfield, Missouri. They were cruising around looking for a car to steal, and they were seen by a motorcycle cop named Tom Purcell. And he pulled them over, and as they so often did, they took him on a real long joyride. Ended up back in ORONOGO, actually. I have a whole video about this, too. During this joyride, Clyde admits that he was responsible for the ORONOGO bank robbery. Tom said, yeah, I heard about that job, so that was you, huh? And later, Hollis Hale and Frank Hardy were both captured. They also claimed responsibility for the bank robbery, and Hollis and Frank both did time for it. Dr. Norton went to Carthage to identify them. Yep, that's the guy who robbed me. I recognize him. Clyde moved on, eventually getting back together with his brother Buck, who gets out of prison finally, is pardoned for a job they had pulled years before together. Then there's the shootout in Joplin, and of course things just go south until they finally are killed by the police in May of 1934. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode about Bonnie and Clyde. It's been a while since I've covered this topic. It's kind of nice to get back to it. Unfortunately, much of my stuff is demonetized by YouTube. So if you like what you saw, please like the video. It helps so much with the algorithm. I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel, sharing with your friends. At patreon.com/madamorbid, you can become a regular contributor. You can also do a super thanks should you be able to make a contribution. But no matter what, I'm just glad you're here, I'm glad you're watching, and I hope you enjoyed yourself. I will see you next time.